Welcome back. We are here at our final topic in Unit 2, Effects of Migration. I'm Miss Newroth, and let's get started. What will we learn today? This video will explain historical and contemporary geographic effects of migration. Attitudes and policies regarding migration are influenced by many things, including international relations between countries, public perception of migrants, how migrants may impact the economy in positive or negative ways, and how many resources are available in the receiving country. We're going to take a look both at historical patterns of migration and contemporary patterns of migration and their effects. So when we look historically and we're looking at political effects, often things that come to mind would be forced migrations, much like you learned about in the last unit, like the involuntary removal of Native Americans from their land. These actions had catastrophic effects, including the loss of many lives and the reduction of land for Native Americans. These consequences can even be seen today in where we see Native Americans living and the reservation system. So these historical acts still have present day consequences. In current political migration, we see several different things. In today's world, when migrants seek political safety in another country, they would be considered asylum seekers. They would have to apply in some cases and may or may not be accepted into that receiving country for that asylum status. Two other things that we'll talk about here with political effects of migration would be refugees and internally displaced people. And there is a distinct difference between the two. A refugee is someone who is forced to migrate because of a negative situation like war, natural disaster, violence, or some kind of persecution. The key is that they flee to a different country. An internally displaced person, or IDP, is forced to migrate for similar reasons, but they do not cross international borders. They stay within their original country. One other political effect of migration would be border disputes. Migration, largely unauthorized migration, can cause many border disputes between countries. And these border disputes are based on several different things, including questions like, should local or national law enforcement enforce border security? Should it be the states along the border or the territories along the border? Or should the national government have to take responsibility for that? How do immigrants affect workplaces with regards to the jobs they perform? Is there any displacement of people at those jobs that are native to that country? And how does that work? How does that dynamic play out? How does immigration enforcement support or infringe on civil rights, both of the migrants and of the citizens of the host country? How should a country enforce border security? That's a big question that a lot of countries are asking. Should they increase personnel along the border? Should they increase or build structures along the border to prevent migration? Or in some cases, they may even want to facilitate migration from one side to the other. So these are all questions that countries have to wrestle with when they're looking at the political effects of migration. Which turns us to the economic effects of migration. Migrants often fill very important jobs that the native population cannot or choose not to do. If migrants are unable to migrate permanently, they may migrate temporarily or even seasonally. These migrants often send home a portion of their wages or remittances to support family and friends. This is a typical reason why we would see migrants migrating for work so that they can support families back home, perhaps covering costs for things like healthcare or education. In some cases, migrants with higher levels of training or education, like doctors or scientists or computer programmers, may migrate internationally in order to make more money in a different country. This phenomenon is known as brain drain. So we may see this, unfortunately, in areas that could really use those highly skilled workers that could benefit their communities in really tremendous ways. Those workers may make the decision to travel somewhere else where they can use their education and be compensated highly for that education, perhaps compensated better for their education than what they would receive in their home country. There are also cultural effects of migration. Some countries place quotas or limits on the number of immigrants that are admitted from certain countries. In the United States created a diversity lottery, actually, for people coming from countries that historically sent very few people to the United States. So you may not know that. You may not have heard of that before, that some people may be given priority over others based on their country of origin. These policies have certainly had an impact on the cultural diversity of the United States, the amount of people that have been admitted from certain parts of the world. Another cultural effect of migration is cultural issues that are related to this. In some cases, migration may become cultural, and migrants might be blamed for social ills and may even face persecution because of their ethnicity or their nationality. Anti-immigrant sentiment often comes from a fear that migrants will change cultural traditions, things like religious traditions or lingual traditions or culinary traditions. Let's take a moment to practice with these concepts. During the 19th and 20th centuries, which of the following types of intra-regional migration was the most prominent worldwide? Now, I've selected this question because we are at the final video for all of Unit 2, and I wanted to choose something that would encompass a lot of the key ideas that you've been working with. So let's highlight a couple of things in this question here. First of all, they're looking for intra-regional migration, so migration within. And the second piece of this is looking at major global patterns. So we're figuring out the correct answer for this particular question based on the scale that the question is at. So worldwide intra-regional migration, what is the most prominent trend? And the answer is either A, rural to urban, B, urban to suburban, C, inland to coastal, D, highland to lowland, or E, urban to rural. The answer here, you hopefully know at this point, is rural to urban. This is the biggest trend that we see globally. And as you remember from our first unit, we talked a lot about scale. So if we changed the scale of this question, the answer may be different. If we were looking at some cities in the United States, the biggest trend that we're seeing right now is actually urban to suburban. So this is a good way to refresh your memory about how important scale is, and also gives you a chance to practice some of the concepts we've been talking about. In conclusion today, attitudes and policies regarding migration are influenced by many things, including international relations, public perception of migrants, how migrants may impact the economy positively or negatively, and how many resources are available in the receiving country. As we wrap up here today with migration, it's time to start looking ahead to your next unit, which will be all about culture. So stick around and keep your eyes open because, as I always say, geography is everywhere.